Hi everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I'm going to make a scratch-built rocket from spare parts that I have in junk boxes and parts boxes and things like that. And the basis is going to be this balsa material, and this is left over from an Estes Alpha kit, actually 3 Estes Alpha kits. So after you took the fins out to actually build those kits, we have this balsa left behind. But it's got a really nice parallel grain to this long edge, so this makes a really nice leading edge, and then this would be the root edge for the rocket itself. And way back in my youth, the first kit I ever built was a Centuri Moonraker, and this consisted of 2 short body tubes that were held one on top of the other by the motor, and then it just had a nose cone in front. And then it had some fairly long fins, not quite this long, but 2 of those fins were attached to one of the body tubes and one was attached to another. And when you put a motor inside of that, it held everything in position so that it looked like you just had 3 fins around a single body tube. And then after the ejection charge went out, the motor would get kicked out the back. The 2 body tubes would separate, and one of those would flutter down with 2 of the fins, and the other would flutter down with the 3rd fin and the nose cone. Okay, so that's what I've got in mind for this. And the first thing I want to do is put this into OpenRocket and make sure it's going to fly. Alright, so here's what I have put into OpenRocket, and I want to take a look here at the fin itself. So this is what I've put in. So this is just that same fin that's now been entered into OpenRocket here. And then what I did was take a set of 3 and then split them into individual fins. So that I also have here 2 body tubes. And let me just increase this bit here. Okay, so we have 1 body tube here that has the nose cone attached to it, and another body tube down here. Okay, and both of those are held in place by the motor. Now here I'm going to change motors. That one looks a little weird because it's a composite. All right, so the nose cone actually acts as the engine block here, and having 2 4-centimeter body tubes means that with the nose cone in place, there's just enough room for a standard 18-millimeter motor with a few millimeters of overhang here. Okay, and normally this is just friction fit in, actually not too tightly, so that when it does reach apogee and the ejection charge goes off, the 2 body tubes separate, one with 2 of the fins and one with 1 of the fins, and the whole thing should just kind of flutter down nicely. Okay, so if we look at some configurations here, I tried one with an 8.3, works just fine, but let's try something with a little more oomph. We'll put a SDC65 in there. Okay, check our stability over here, which is at 3, and this should be a really stable rocket with all that fin material hanging behind it. Okay, so if we do that, that gives us a simulation. Here we'll just run all of these again. Okay, so even with an A engine, this is going to go up more than 100 meters. With a C up around 328, that's about 1,000 feet. So this should be a really high flyer as well. I'm not sure you necessarily want to do a C65 unless you get an open field and a calm day. Okay, but everything here is going to work just fine. No problems with stability or anything like that. So we will go back to the lab and start working on those fins. So the first thing we'll do here is sand these so that they're all exactly the same. Okay, so there are some minor differences here. Mostly just dependent upon how and where it got cut. fact, I've got some more here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just see which ones are very close to each other in size already, which may be those three. Okay, so here, got a little bit of damage there, so I'm just going to snip that a little bit. Okay, and then back here, and the same thing. Alright, so I'm going to take the other stuff, put it back in the scrap pile. And now the first thing I'm going to do is take some 100 grit sandpaper here and just sand these down so that they're all the same size. Okay, so I've put them all on what will become the leading edge here first of all. Sand down the root edge. Okay, and then that little bump there that we just cut, like that. Okay, we've got quite a bit of difference there on the very end. So I'm going to cut that first of all, and then we'll sand the rest of it. Okay, and then we'll just do that whole leading edge. Okay, a little bit right there. Okay, and now I'm going to go through and on each fin individually, we'll now sand the surface and then clean up the edges here. As far as streamlining goes, I am probably just going to leave these square rather than trying to round them off. Mainly for strength. So this is going to have a lot of fin out here, and we don't want that to snap, and so the square cross section here is going to give us the best strength. If you wanted to, you could just round this, and if I get ambitious I might, but I really don't see much of a need to go through and do a full airfoil on these. It'd be very time consuming if nothing else. Okay, so here I'm going to start with a quick sanding of the surface with 100 grit. Alright, and then follow that with some 150 grit here. Smooth things out better. Alright, now I'm going to go in here and smooth out all these little nubs where the original alpha fins used to be attached. Okay, make sure that our root edge is nice and square and level. And here our leading edge. Okay, I'm not going to fully round this, but I'm going to flatten the corner edges just a little, just to keep them from peeling. Alright, and then I'm going to repeat that with the other two fins off camera. Here we have all the parts for this rocket. I've got a nose cone here. I've got a couple of scrap tubes, and both of those will be cut down. And then a launch lug here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is cut these tubes at 4 centimeters. Unfortunately, the tubes are about 7 centimeters long, so I can't just cut one in half. And to help with this, I'm going to use this tube cutting guide that Estes makes. I found this is really handy for getting clean tube cuts. Okay, so we'll just line that up, squish it together. There we go, and that kind of locks the tube into place. And then we can just take a hobby knife here. There we go. It's not locking as well as I would like. That's all right. Alright. It's not the best cut I've ever made. We can just take a little sandpaper here, straighten that out. Okay, and then we're going to do the same with this other tube here. So again, we'll mark this at 4. Try a little finer sandpaper here. Alright, so these are going to go together like this. I'm going to try and find, I think I've got, see which edges are closest together here. Alright, so here's an engine spacer, also from a Viking kit. So that'll allow us to put these together. And if we put the nose cone in, alright, so that's how it's going to look. So when this ejects, that should pop apart, or perhaps even the whole motor pops out. Either way is fine. And then we'll have one fin attached to this and two of the fins attached to this, and both of those should flutter down. Okay, for the next part I'm going to use this tube marking guide, and I'm going to go ahead and put my spacer back in here to keep these together. Okay, and then we'll just pop this down on top of the BT20 set there. And so we're going to have a total of 3 fins. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this as if it's one long tube rather than 2 little ones. Okay, I'll pop that off. And then we'll use this tube guide here. And so I'm just going to hold this together, and I'm going to extend the lines all the way down, both tubes. Alright, so I don't want them to come apart like that. In fact, here I'm going to put just a little bit of masking tape on. Now we've got that first line on there, so that this does not move on us. Alright, and no, I don't have a launch lug line. I'm just going to put my launch lug right against one of the fins. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put the fins on, and I'm going to take some sandpaper here and we're going to roughen this up. So when this is attached, the fins are going to go on about like that. Okay, so they're going to, they've got some character to them. But when we glue these, on one of the fins we're only going to glue it to the top here, and then on the other two we'll only glue it to the bottom. So for my top fin, I'm just going to assume it's right here. Just going to roughen that up a little bit, give a good gluing contact. Okay, and now usually I prefer to apply glue to the fin first rather than to the tube, and I still may do it that way. I think gluing the tube first is just going to get messy. Okay, here I'm just going to apply glue to the very forward part of this. Then we will see how that matches here. Let me find my sanded spot. Okay, I got that right about where I need it. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that down quick. I'm going to let that get tacky for about a minute, and then we'll come back and put it back on. Okay, that's had some time to dry just a little bit, and so now we're going to put this right back where I had it. Okay, press that in, make sure it is straight. Alright, and it's going to try and do that. There's a lot of leverage on that fin, so we're going to have to be really careful about holding on to it. Okay, but I'm going to let this dry for at least a good 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and do the other ones. Okay, so the first fin is drying on the top tube. I've gone ahead and separated the tubes here, and I've also sanded my lines for the other two fins. So it's going to be any two adjacent ones here will be fine. Okay, and then just like we did before, but on the lower end, go ahead and apply some glue here. And we want to get this so it's just exactly the length of our tube. It's going to be pretty close there. Alright, and I think we can get away with just putting it on like that. Nah, we'll let it tack up again. Okay, we'll let that get a little bit more tacky. I'm just going to stick that right on. Okay, and here again we're going to try and get this as straight as possible. Alright, and then I'm going to let this dry completely, and then I'll do the second fin that goes on this tube. The glue is dry on the fins, and somewhere along the line one of them shifted a bit here. So this is our one fin assembly here, and it shifted up a little bit so that that part is not quite flush. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it, because I think trying to redo it's just going to cause more damage. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and separate these now. And I'm going to glue on a launch lug. Okay, and I'm going to put this on the upper section here, so that just in case this separates upon launch, it's still going to be attached to the part that hopefully would still have the motor in it. Move that down a bit. Yeah, I think flush with the aft end is going to be best. Okay, so I just need to let that dry. We can also go ahead and attach the nose cone at this point. So this is going to fit right into there like that. And since we're doing two dissimilar materials here, I'm going to use some gel type super glue. I'm also just going to rough up the shoulder here a little bit. Give it something to adhere to. Alright, so here, take my thick super glue, and I'm just going to run a bead right inside this tube. And I don't want too much here, or we'll end up with a great big blob down inside with the motor. Alright, and I'm just going to turn this as I put it on to help get that glue as even as possible. Alright, you can look down inside there. No big globs, so that's good. So we can go ahead and let that one finish drying. On the lower part here, we can go ahead and add some fillets. Okay, I'm just going to let that dry in a horizontal position. Now the glue is dry on my launch lug. I'll go ahead and put the fillets on it and the third fin as well. I might have got a little bit of a cant to that. Well, if it spins its way up, we'll know I did. Okay, this can go back and dry horizontally as well. So here I have the two halves of the rocket. They've been primered, and I need to do a little bit of sanding on these to remove little bits of sanding dust there and little bits of wood. And then one half of the rocket will get one type of paint and the other half will get another type. I think I'm going to go with a yellow and orange scheme. But this needs a little bit of sanding here, and so when I come back I'll have these painted. Here I have the rocket painted. I ended up going with a red and orange color scheme rather than yellow and orange because I got to looking around the lab and I have way too many yellow rockets. Also gave some self-stick decals here in an animal theme. And trying to come up with a name for this rocket, I finally decided on Tumblina. So to prep this for launch, all we have to do here is take a motor and insert that into first the two fin half and then up into the single fin and nose cone. Now this is really loose. Okay, now this can be loose, but you want to have it at least tight enough that it doesn't come apart on the launch pad. Okay, and so when it's ready for launch, it looks about like this. Okay, and then it's just a matter of making sure everything's straight there so it flies straight. But that's it. All this thing needs in it now is an igniter and a launch pad. So with that, Hope this was informative to you, and have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.